A side, B side, what side are you on?
Well, hello, and welcome back to another episode of A Side B Side podcast. How are you, Adam?
I am well, Brooke. Surviving. We are up here. We were just talking about how this has been a weird weather year, and hopefully, we're recording this on Wednesday as we always do. So hopefully, the weird storm that's cutting across the center of the country just stays weird, and everybody stays safe.
So, of course, you've probably heard the news. It's been everywhere. The massive devastation that happened in several states, and of course, one of those areas was where I just moved from, Bowling Green, Kentucky, and seeing the photos. Actually, someone sent me like a map of the devastation, and you can type in your address and see like what areas were hit. And like I knew from picture wise, I knew how close it was. It literally was a block from where I used to live, which means there was still probably minor damage, but like where it hit heavy was a block, from where I lived. And I know everybody I know is fortunately alive and well, but I know some people that have lost massive amounts of property or their vehicles or both. And then, just the realization that it was so close to where I lived, and, seeing the pictures of a city that I lived in for nearly 2 decades. It's heartbreaking. And I've tried to explain to my daughter, she's, it's funny because she's 22, but she's like, well, you weren't impacted, so why are you upset? And I'm like, because we lived there for 2 decades.
Yeah.
We know people. No, I wasn't personally impacted, but seeing a place that I lived and literally just moved from is devastating.
Yeah. And it's that weird unintended consequence too of things like movies like Twister, which is a great movie and we all enjoy it, but we enjoy it for it almost makes natural disasters seem like something out of Hollywood, and it makes them more mythical or more make-believe, because when you see the pictures, it almost doesn't feel real.
Yeah,
because it feels like it's something out of a disaster movie, and it's like where art makes reality seem less real. But yeah, those pictures are just incredible.
and I got to my new company allowed me to talk to the old company and push some relief efforts, which I thought was great, and I give them a lot of props for that, because that's really cool that they allow me to do that, because they could have just been like, well, it doesn't involve us, you don't need to really talk about it. But
no, didn't hit us, too bad for them.
Right. But the fact that I just came from there and they know how deeply that it impacted me, they allowed me to do that. So I got to talk to a couple of people that I, former co-workers, and that's how they described it. It's just surreal, and they're in it. They just said just looking around the town is just surreal.
Yeah. I haven't been in Bowling Green for 14 years. But I still, I know you, and I still am connected through social media with a lot of people, and just even going through Facebook and seeing people post pictures of stuff that happened down the street, or, talking about even things that places that I remember that were hit. It makes it very, very real, and it feels surreal, because you're like, oh, this is, something that happens somewhere else. It didn't happen, it's a story or a movie. This is the real deal.
I know. And then I was trying to explain this to someone, and I think maybe you'll get it. I feel like almost guilty, because I want to be there to help, but I can't. Like, I'm so far away, but it's like I wish I would. Like, I don't want to leave my current situation because I love it, but part of me is like, I wish I was still back there so that I could help more in some way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think in a way, and this is not having doctor's degree, a medical degree, Dr. Adam speaking, but it almost feels like a like a version of survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like you didn't leave town because this was coming, but you left town before it happened, and you were there for 2 decades, and you're still part of the community. So you almost feel like the person who went through the intersection before the car crash, like that could have been me. I mean, like
Yeah.
the bridge that collapsed here in Minnesota, back 10, 11 years ago, my parents had driven over that bridge earlier in the day, and like you think about how you connect to those moments. So I think it makes complete sense. There's got to be some aspect of survivor's guilt to it. And I am not a doctor, and I don't play one on TV, but I will if somebody wants me to.
He does have an IMDb page.
That's right. Yeah, and it's severely lacking in credits.
I on a like totally changing gears. I've been on a mission to watch like a Christmas movie every day if possible. If I can't, if I feel like I can't fit in a movie, then on HBO there's a show called 12 Dates of Christmas. So I'll switch over to that. Like if I'm like, I know I don't have enough time to watch a movie, but I want something Christmassy, I'll watch.
So that feels like it should be on the Hallmark Channel, not on HBO.
But it's a dating competition.
Oh, that's a weird thing. Like dating's hard enough, but now we got to make it a competition. Got to make it a game.
So it's terrible, but I can't help but watch it. So basically, it's 3 different people, and they okay. So they're all in like this castle, and I don't know where because it's nice and snowy and beautiful, and I can't imagine the electric bill, and don't want to. So they've got a straight male, a gay female, and so then they initially pair up with one, like a date, and then they'll be on a date. Let's say they're skiing or something. And then the ski instructor will come out and they'll be like, oh, by the way, I'm your new love interest. So now they're the person they were on a date with leaves, and then they're on the date with the new love interest. And then I guess it's kind of like The Bachelor, like where they end up picking somebody to go home eventually.
Do you remember Singled Out?
Yes.
It's classy Singled Out.
Yes.
Like where Singled Out used to happen in like a parking lot at a bowling alley and filmed in like one evening with like very minimal production value. Yeah. This is like, what if somebody gave us a budget? We could do Singled Out in a castle.
Yeah, that's what it is. But it's not just one person. You're watching 3 separate people trying to find love, take someone home for the holidays.
Wow. I mean, dating is hard enough, and then the holidays are hard enough. And I know there are many people that, and maybe I am creating a larger demographic than it is because I'm really just talking about myself. But a lot of people just swear off dating when they're single around the holidays because it's just like, why would you add that landmine into an already? You're like, oh, I have to cross this minefield that is full of buried mines from World War II, but I got to do it while juggling, and my mom is there.
Well, and get this. So apparently there's a new, there's all these dating terms, ghosting and whatever. Mm-hmm. But there's a new one, and it's called Snow. Well, apparently Cosmo magazine coined it back in 2019, but it's just becoming popular this year because I guess more people are talking about it. Probably TikTok. Everything is because of TikTok.
And for like 2 years, nobody was meeting anybody because we were all locked down.
That's true. But apparently there's this thing called snow globing. It's where you are dating someone, whether intentionally or not. When you're dating someone, you make it seem more serious around the holidays, like maybe buying them romantic gifts or like taking them to meet family. And then after the holiday is over, you kind of just die out.
Yeah. No,
you got to deal with this now too.
I still remember there was one Christmas where a sibling of mine brought the person that they were dating at the time, and we didn't know until like the day before that they were coming. So we're like, the whole family's like rushing out to get presents. And then that person wasn't around about like 2 months later. So
I love how you say a sibling like you have so many.
Well, I don't need to like be calling anybody out. Our listeners in Luxembourg do not know my family situation.
A sibling, like you've got 24 of them.
Well, yeah, my family's basically, like the
The Von
Brady Bunch,
Traps.
yeah,
You're
the
the
Von
Von
Traps. That's
Traps.
better. Yeah, the Von Traps. We had to sing on the stairs every night before bed. It's awful.
So long.
Farewell, Auf Wiedersehen. We'll stop now before we get sued.
Oh man. So that's been my last week, just watching, like, just trying to watch as many Christmas movies as possible. And of course, they're the cheesier the better, and they're all cheesy when they're on Hallmark, or Netflix has, their take on the Hallmark movies,
Hmm.
Hulu.
And I think it's just natural that we are serving as the yin and the yang. I have not watched a single Christmassy thing yet.
Seriously? Do you
I
have
do not.
decorations up?
I have one wreath on my balcony. Uh, that so I had Christmas lights that up last year on the balcony because I live on a busy street. So it's nice to have the lights. And I've got my red deck chair out there. It's a big Adirondack chair, and so people ask, "Oh, you live over there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you can see my porch when you drive by. You just look for the red chair." So I've had lights up there that I left up all year long, and I just unplugged, thinking, "Oh, I'll just replug them when it comes to be Christmas season because I am lazy male." And then I was like, "Oh, but this year I'm gonna like step it up a notch." So I went to Target and I bought a lighted wreath as well, and zip tied that to the balcony, and then plugged it all in. And the only thing that lit up was the wreath. Uh, so I've had, just as I said, the most lazy male like object lesson. I have a two strings of dead Christmas lights then wrapped around my balcony for 12 months that are not working, and then one wreath that is lit up because for some reason the electricity goes through the lights just fine, but none of them turn on. So that's all the decorations I have up. I'm not a big holiday person, but this year I think I am doing even more Scroogey than normal.
Okay. Which I think it's really funny that I've been watching all, you have up more decorations than I do, and I'm the one that's been watching all the Christmas movies. I don't have up
I,
any.
I have a decoration that is more. That
Right.
isn't like there's not a lot of competitions I could win with a decoration.
That's what I'm saying. You still have up more than me with your one decoration. I have nothing.
I mean, you did just move.
Yeah, and I just haven't, I don't know, like, I don't know why I didn't. I'm usually really big into decorating, and I even when I packed my storage unit that's in the bottom floor of the apartment,
Hmm.
I made sure that my Christmas decorations were on top so I could just open the door and grab them, and I just haven't. And now I feel like if I do, it's only going to be up for like a week.
Yeah, yeah. But
So it's,
I mean, but maybe you're being the antithesis of the people that put them up like November 1st.
yeah.
Because they're definitely in our neighborhood. Like it was like the Halloween decorations went down and the Christmas lights started going up. So, but I think I've been talking with other people at work and friends and stuff. This year has felt really weird. It doesn't. I don't know if it's the weather, if it's just everything happening in the world. It it feels like Christmas is really like it's not Christmas season yet. Even though
Yeah.
it is. Like we have 10 days. All of the emails this week are like, if you want anything shipped, it's too late.
Yeah. 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 Have you watched anything good? Or are you still
Uh,
watching reruns?
I'm still watching reruns, but I've also been like, because I think I'm just gonna always have reruns as part of my list at this point. Of course, I'm watching the new Hawkeye each week. That's been really enjoyable. So I guess technically that one, I guess I like because it's definitely holiday themed. So I guess I should probably admit that I've watched that, which is kind of a holiday movie or series because it's definitely got a holiday theme to it.
Right.
So I've been watching there's another episode that came out today, which I've been forcing myself to wait to watch to after we record. We'll see with the big storm that's coming into Minnesota today. It's leaving. It's leaving where you are, Brooke, in Nebraska, and heading to Minnesota. Maybe my power will go out in the middle of watching Hawkeye episode 5.
Oh yeah, I
Uh,
plan to watch that tonight too.
yeah, I really enjoyed the last one. I'm again, it seems like there's so many things that they're going to have to wrap up in just 2 episodes that feel like there's too much. But that's the way I felt in all the other Disney series, Disney Plus Marvel series as well. It's like there's just too much. What are they gonna? How are they gonna wrap all this up? And they always manage to do enough. So I'm sure it'll be good. I've been watching The Wheel of Time on Amazon Prime.
Mm-hmm.
The Robert Jordan book series, which is sort of a Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, sword sorcerers series, and it's really grown on me. At first, it was it took me a little bit of getting into, but that's another one. And it's funny how we got so into binge watching entire series, and now these new streaming services are really doing the release one a week thing again.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of digging the one a week thing because it's spreading it out. It's spreading out my enjoyment of the series a little bit more. Because
the funny thing is, like, the younger generation, you hear them like, oh, I like this weekly drop model thing that's brand new, because everybody's the younger generation is so used to binging. It's like, no, this is how we used to watch TV. You didn't invent this.
Yeah, this isn't a new thing. This is like everything that is old is new again. And the only thing is that, like, you don't have to like rush home to make sure you catch it. Like, your life doesn't revolve around what time it's on TV. You can watch it when it's convenient for you. So it's still convenient.
You miss it. There's always Hulu.
Yeah.
We didn't have that.
No. It was like, you want to see the last episode of Cheers, you get home by 7:00.
Right.
Or you're not going to know what's happening. It's been I know we talked about 24 last episode, or one of the last episodes where we watched it when we were working together, and I'm trying to think if that was like, I think Game of Thrones was probably like the last one that I remember where everybody was like, hey, did you watch this week's episode?
Mm-hmm.
But that was, even by the last season, people weren't doing watch parties. And I guess your reality shows, they still have watch party, Bachelorette, Bachelor, and that sort of thing.
I'm trying to. Because I can't think of any major, unless it's sports nowadays, really.
Yeah. I mean, I talk about the Disney Plus stuff with people like after it comes out, but other than that, it's like you gotta have to have like conversation before the conversation when you want to talk about a show. Like, okay, so have you watched this on Netflix or that? And then you have to ask, how far are you in?
Yes.
Like, because you don't want to be the person that like ruins it.
You don't want to be the spoiler.
But you also really want to talk about it. But everybody's at different spots.
Yes, I always ask, like, when somebody starts telling me about a show that they've asked me if I watch a show, and then they start talking to me about it. One of the first questions I ask is, okay, what episode, what season? Because I don't want to give anything away.
Yeah, and it is so easy to do. It's funny that we have to have that sort of like almost consent conversation when it comes to like, what can I tell you about this show?
That I did that recently with a new show that just came out. It's only got 2 episodes. It's the Sex and the City reboot. And just
yeah, that's another one that I guess that definitely would be on the like, because I've never watched an episode of Sex and the City. I have not watched an episode of the reboot, but I have heard a lot about it.
And I feel like that one got spoiled pretty early. Like, it came out on maybe a Wednesday. I think tonight's the new episode for that. And then because I didn't watch it until Friday, and then by Monday it was already spoiled, and I'm like, come on, people, it's not even been out a week yet.
Yeah, I'm surprised it lasted that long. So that's the new stuff. Of course, I've been watching Murder, She Wrote on IMDb and rewatching some old movies, as I am wont to do. And one of those old movies is part of the A-side today. So I'm going to stop there before I ruin my own segment.
All right. So you ready to jump in then?
I am. Am I going first this week? I'm confused again.
No, it's me this week.
Okay. Look at me.
This is 73.
73.
73.
No, this is I don't think I would have put money down that we would make it 73 episodes before Brooke got tired of doing this without us.
I was gonna say, no, if it was just you, it would not have made it to 73 episodes.
No, it wouldn't.
But because I kick your butt every week, I'm like, you ready? You ready? You ready?
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, it definitely. But I'm more surprised that like you haven't gotten tired of being like, all right, Adam, I gotta edit your darn ums and ahs every week.
All right, so episode 73. So this is a rare case of sibling serial killers. I mean, we talk about serial killers. We've talked about the stereotypical, the standard, which is the white male, and then we've talked about how there are black males that are serial killers. This is even more rare because it's 3 black male siblings.
Wow. Usually we've heard like couples, but we haven't had many teams. There was like that one gang of teenagers with the crime spree, but that's really like the only other time I can think of like more than 2 people involved.
Yeah. So it's actually 3 brothers and then an additional accomplice. This is the story of the Briley Brothers. So the Briley Brothers were Linwood Earl, born March 26 of 1954, James Dyrell Jr., born June 6th of 1958, and Anthony Ray, who was born February 17th of 1958. 58. Nope, hold on. 54, 56, 58. Forgive me. So they were all 2 years apart.
I'll allow it this one time.
Which I kind of think it's funny that Linwood was the oldest and then James Jr. was the second. That always kind of makes me laugh when the junior is not the oldest. Because the oldest is like, oh, I couldn't be junior.
Well, yeah, that means that one of the parents was like, nah.
Yeah.
And I think you would stereotypically think mom was like, no, we're not going to have a junior. And then by the second one, she's like, whatever, fine, have a junior.
Yeah. She was tired by the second one. I was like,
I'm tired of arguing about it.
I don't care, whatever.
We named this one. I didn't want to name this one because he's just like you, and he's just like you anyway. So just name the kid whatever you want.
Right. So they were all born in Richmond, Virginia, to James Dyrell Sr. and Bertha. They grew up in the Highland Park area in a really good family. And James Sr. and Bertha were like really loving, good parents. They weren't abused. There wasn't any like family issues. They came from a really good home. The trio was regarded by their neighbors as respectful young men that would even help them in the neighborhood with things like car repairs or lawn mowing. So the boys collected exotic pets like tarantulas, piranhas, boa constrictors, which in itself is not necessarily a sign, but we have seen that in serial killers before, especially when there's other signs that they might be heading down a dark path. The boys had a habit of feeding small animals to their boas, which granted, yes, boa constrictors do eat small animals, but when you're actively doing this as like a torture method, that's where the red flag comes in. You're not just feeding
it's one
them.
thing to be like, this is a majestic creature that I respect and want to take care of and enjoy for its majesty and snakiness. And another one would be like, look, it eats stuff.
Right, exactly.
Watch it die.
Watch it devour this mouse.
Get a bigger one.
So as the boys hit their teen years, Bertha and James Sr. separated. Bertha moved away. James Dyrell Briley Sr. was said to be the only person that the boys feared. And even with that, James Sr. was said to have slept with his bedroom door padlocked from the inside.
Jeez.
Yeah. So Linwood, James Jr., and Anthony, and a young man that looked up to the trio named Duncan Eric Meeks all formed their own little gang. There's not a lot known about Duncan Meekins before the whole gang thing, his early years. Don't really know much about him. So on January 28th of 1971, the Briley Boys, we're going to call all 4 of them the Briley Boys just for simplicity.
Okay.
So the Briley Boys took their first victim. Actually, it was Linwood at the age of 16. Her name, Orline Christian, was a neighbor. She was home alone when Linwood shot her from his bedroom window. Orline was outside hanging clothes on a clothing line at the time. This heinous act almost went unidentified because Orline had just lost her husband. So initially it was believed that she died of like a heart attack, but she had a broken heart. You know, we hear about that happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but usually that doesn't involve a gunshot.
Right. So it was believed initially that she died, broken heart, stress, heart attack from the loss of her husband. But her relatives noticed a small amount of blood under her armpit of her robe when it was returned from the funeral home. So they requested for the funeral home director to re-examine her body. It was with this re-examination that they discovered a small caliber bullet wound under her armpit, meaning she did not have a heart attack.
No, I mean, her heart probably had issues from getting shot.
Yeah. So a detective recreated the scene in her yard, and he stood in Orleans' backyard and used a sheet of plywood to represent her body, and a hole was cut to represent the wound, her bullet wound. He was able to determine during this reenactment that the bullet came from the Briley residence, more specifically from Linwood's bedroom. So, of course, this allows a search. They get a search warrant. Search of the residence reveals the murder weapon. Linwood confesses to the crime, saying, "I heard she had heart problems. She would have died soon anyway." What?
Wow.
What?
Wow.
So
Okay.
Linwood Earl Briley was sent to reform school to serve a whopping 1 whole year for the murder. 1 whole entire year.
And he was a minor at the time?
He was 16 at the time.
Okay. Probably factored into the streaming or to the sentencing.
Yeah. So James Jr., his younger brother, followed in Big Brother's footsteps. And at 16, he also was sent to juvenile hall. His crime was for firing at a police officer during a pursuit. James had been described as not as bright as Linwood and cold by Chesterfield County Special Prosecutor Warren Van Such. So he's a real cold-blooded dude, but not real smart, he's saying, or not as smart as his brother. So after their stints in juvies, the boy reconnected. And in 1979, Linwood, James Jr. and Anthony, along with Duncan, began a 7-month reign of terror that terrified Richmond, Virginia, and surrounding areas, not errors. The trio of boys, the trio of brothers plus Duncan, committed their first attack together on March 12th of 1979. One of the boys, later identified as Linwood, knocked on the door of William and Virginia Boucher in Henrico County just before 9 p.m. At first, William thought that it was the paper boy coming to collect payment, which, why are you coming at 9 o'clock to collect payment? But whatever.
He's got school during the week.
So he opens a door, and it was someone that William didn't recognize, saying that their car had broken down. The young man asks to use the phone to call AAA. By the way, I have AAA, or had AAA. I didn't realize they'd been around that long.
Yeah, it's like forever.
Yeah.
It's really, I'm very useful if you have a car and you're driving around and you ever I highly recommend it as someone who has had a lot of car accidents and things break down. And
the only reason I don't have AAA is because my current insurance does all of that.
Yeah, that's a lot of them do.
Yeah, that's the only reason. I had AAA for years, though.
I mean, I even had one time where I didn't have it active, like my account had lapsed, and I called them, and they were like, "Hey, sorry, your account is no longer active." And I'm like, "Okay, well, can I just re-up right now?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." And so it was like, $30 for the year, and then they sent out a tow truck for free. I was like, this is way cheaper.
Nice. Yeah, real nice. So, okay, so William doesn't recognize the young man. He's asking to use the phone to call AAA. William tells the young man that he'll call for him He's like, just give me your AAA card and I'll call him for you. I mean, I understand you don't want to let this person in your house you don't know, but you also want to help
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Trying to find the happy medium.
So the young man at the door fumbles or pretends to fumble for a card, and he finally gets out a card and he goes to hand it to William. And as William opens the door, the young man barges in to the house, gun in hand. Once inside, the other young men enter the residence as well. The couple is forced into separate rooms and tied up with rope. It's believed that Duncan is the one that did the rope tying, and it was due to his inexperience that ultimately the lives of the Bouchers were spared. So the couple is tied up. The boys ransack the house, and then they spray some kind of flammable liquid everywhere. Then they light the fumes and they leave. When the Briley gang was gone, William manages to wiggle out of his ropes and free himself. And then he goes to his wife and he's able to cut her free with a knife that he retrieves from the kitchen. The two fled the house to safety. The Brileys stole the Boucher's car and abandoned it. They also stole 2 televisions, William's .32 caliber gun, a police scanner. The only victim, the Butchers, I'm not quite sure how you say it, the Bouchers or Bouchers, we're going to go with Bouchers, are the only victims to ever survive. Sadly, their cat didn't make it though.
Oh.
Yeah. So next we have Michael Mcduff. 9 days later, on March 21st, Michael was a vending machine salesman who was assaulted, shot, and robbed in his very own home. 10 days later, the Briley Boys strike again on March 31st. Duncan got into a dispute over drugs with 28-year-old Elric Alvin Clark. Linwood shoots and kills him. 9 days after Elric's death came the Briley Boys' next victim. On April 19th, the Briley Boys followed Mary Gowan, Gowan to her home. 76-year-old Mary had been babysitting, and as she was on her way home, they follow her, they go into her house, and they beat and they rape and they rob her. They escape with her valuables, and then they, on the way out, unfortunately, they shoot and kill her. There appears there was a several-month lapse, either where they were quiet or they committed crimes that weren't connected to them. The Briley Boys strike again on July 4th. The gang stumble upon 17-year-old Christopher Phillips, who's hanging around Linwood's car. The group assumed that Christopher might have been trying to steal the vehicle, so they surround him. They drag him into a nearby yard. It was actually the back of someone's house, and they wrestle him to the ground. Christopher is on the ground. He's screaming for help, and Linwood drops a cinder block onto his head, killing him.
Jeez. It's like something out of a movie.
Yeah. These boys, there was none of the signs in the beginning. Like, there was no head injuries. They came from a good family. There was no abuse. Like,
they weren't like, stringing up cats by their tails and watching them suffer. Like,
it's just like, what caused this? Nature versus nurture. A lot of times it's you can see it. They've got the bad parents or, the abusive parents or something, but they, no idea.
Or they just never got caught doing stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't like well known. Nobody came forward. Who knows?
So 2 months later, on September 14th, DJ, like professional DJ, John Harvey Gallagher, aka Johnny G, was performing with a band at a South Richmond nightclub called the Log Cabin Dance Hall. So Johnny takes a break. He steps outside in between sets. Unfortunately, that's when he runs across the Briley Boys. The gang didn't even know Johnny. They just had been, on the hunt for another victim all evening long. They just been like looking for somebody. And Johnny was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Opportunity.
Unfortunately for them. They decided, all right, they were outside the club and they were like, all right, whoever comes out next, that's our victim. And it was Johnny. Johnny was assaulted by Linwood and then put in the trunk of his own car, which happened to be a Lincoln Continental. The Briley gang then drives Johnny out to the ruins of a paper mill on Mayo Island in the middle of James River. The gang then takes Johnny out of the trunk and they shoot him point blank in the head. They take
Like the level of pure confusion for Johnny, who's probably like thinking, a million, like trying to figure out what he did.
Right. Who are these people? What did I do? Yeah. The gang takes Johnny's $6 that he had in his wallet and they split it between the four of them. I'm like, really? They dumped Johnny's body into the James River. His body was found 2 days later by a fisherman. His Lincoln Continental was discovered the day after his disappearance. Johnny wore a hairpiece, and that hairpiece was also found nearby his body. Nearby the Lincoln Continental, not his body, because his body was in the river. Months later, when Linwood was arrested on charges not related to Johnny, he was still wearing a ring that he took off Johnny's hand. This ring was actually noticed by Detective Leroy Morgan, who at this point, the Briley boys, they weren't suspects in Johnny's death, but Detective Morgan knew the ring because he'd actually been with Johnny when he bought the ring. So 2 weeks later, on September 30th, the gang follows 62-year-old Mary Wilfong to her Richmond apartment after her shift as a private nurse. They surround her before she can even get in the door, and leader Linwood beats the poor woman to death before going into her apartment and robbing her. Less than a week later, on October 5th, the boys strike close to home, 2 blocks from home, in fact. They enter the home of Blanche Page. Blanche had a boarder named Charles Gamer. Blanche was 75. Charles was 59. Unfortunately, both Charles and Blanche meet horrific ends. Blanche was bludgeoned to death while laying in her own bed. Charles was assaulted and fatally stabbed to death with various different weapons. They included a baseball bat, 5 knives, a pair of scissors, and a fork.
Good grief.
The scissors and the fork were actually left in Charles's back. The Briley gang also light his back on fire using the yellow pages. The final victims of the Briley gang were the family of Harvey Wilkerson, who actually happened to be a longtime friend of the Briley boys. On the morning of October 19th, James was released on parole for a robbery of a convenience store. And during his release, he promised the judge he was going to stay out of trouble. That promise, extremely short-lived because, well, as of that very evening, he leads the gang on a hunt for victims. James does this time instead of Linwood. Harvey, being friends with the boys, so he probably knew what they were capable of, and he saw them walking down the street, and he steps inside and locks his door. Can you blame him? He's at home with his family, So Harvey lived with his 5-month pregnant girlfriend, 23-year-old Judy Diane Barton, and her 5-year-old son, Harvey Wayne Barton. And I really think that he was just looking out for his family. Seriously.
Yeah.
Well, the Briley boys, this action's not missed on them. Also, from all accounts, I mentioned Judy's son, Harvey, and it's also Harvey Wilkerson, and then Judy's son is Harvey. From all accounts that I could find, it was her son, not his. I think the names were just a coincidence, not like a Harvey right. Jr. or anything.
It was just popular at that time.
Yeah. So the Briley gang walks to Harvey's front door and they knock. So Harvey's, all right, I don't want to upset them. Let me just see what they want. So he opens the door and he lets them in. Very quickly, Harvey and Judy are overpowered by the Briley gang. They're bound and gagged with duct tape. Linwood takes Judy in the kitchen and assaults her sexually within earshot of everyone, including her boyfriend, Harvey. I cannot imagine not only how Judy felt, but also Harvey hearing that and not being able to do anything about it. And like knowing he did the right thing in the first place. So then Duncan goes in the kitchen, and unfortunately, Duncan also assaults Judy. When they're finished, Linwood drags Judy into the living room. He then goes to the residence looking for valuables to steal. He leaves. So you have 3 remaining gang members, James Jr., Anthony, Duncan. They cover Harvey, Judy, and little Harvey with sheets. And then James Jr. tells Duncan, "You've got to get one." So Duncan gets a pillow and puts it over Harvey's head. He grabs a pistol and shoots Harvey. James shoots Judy in the head 4 times, and then little Harvey Wayne. That night, police were actually in the area, and they saw gang members running down the street quickly, but they saw the gang members, the Briley gang running down the street, but they didn't relate the gunshots that they had heard to the boys running at the time. Harvey, Judy, and Harvey Wayne's bodies were not discovered until 3 days after their murder. The brothers were all arrested the day after the crime scene was discovered. So earlier that same evening, police investigator Shirley Englehart was doing surveillance in a van outside the boys' home. She's all alone in this van. And right outside the van, she hears James Jr. and Linwood arguing about whether or not police were actually inside the van watching them. James says no. Linwood says yes. The brothers approached the green Chevrolet surveillance van and they began shaking it. James then fires a shot into the air and one into the yard. He tells Linwood that if the police were in fact inside the van, they would have stormed out. That ends the squabble between the brothers, and they leave, and they head off in the direction of the home of Harvey Wilkerson.
You got 2 geniuses having a philosophical discussion.
Yeah. Well, see, I shot and they would have come out by now.
Like, if you're wrong, you're gonna that's a
big chance.
Police are gonna come out and arrest you,
Right. Right.
Jeez.
So Duncan Meekins, of course, who is not actually related to the boys, he doesn't take long to crack it all. Pretty much immediately while being interrogated, he's there with his parents and he just spills he's got all the piping hot tea. Okay. He spills it all. He turns against the Briley boys and confesses in exchange for a plea agreement. So in exchange for details of the crimes, he avoids the death penalty. He's instead given a life sentence and sent to prison in Virginia, away from the Briley brothers.
Yeah, that'd be part of the plea deal that you'd think would be pretty important.
Yeah, exactly. His actual sentence under the agreement was life plus 80 years, which would make him eligible for parole after serving 12 to 15 years. The most recent thing that I could find, he came up for parole in 2009 and was denied. Despite the recommendation from prosecutor Robert J. Rich.
I mean, if I was him, I would have gone with Bobby Rich. But
so despite the recommendation from prosecutors Robert J. Rich and Warren Von Such, who we talked about earlier, they cited his help in convicting the boys, but he was still denied parole. Anthony Briley received a life sentence based on his limited involvement in the crimes, the killings. He was sent to the Augusta Correctional Center, 20 miles outside of Stanton, Virginia. All of his parole applications have been denied. Virginia apparently has a statute called the Triggerman statute. Both Linwood and James were given multiple life sentences for their murder spree. They face capital murder charges only in the cases that they physically committed the murder in. Linwood was sentenced to death for the abduction and murder of Johnny Gallagher. James Jr. was sentenced to death twice, once for the murder of Judy Barton and once for the murder of 5-year-old Harvey Wayne Barton. Linwood and James were sent to death row at Mecklenburg Correctional Center near Boydton. Hanover County Sheriff V. Stuart Cook, who oversaw the Briley gang investigation, said, "There are homicides and then there are homicides. What a brutal bunch of sons of bitches they were." So the Briley gang's arrested and imprisoned. Story over. B-side done.
Yeah.
But not really. There's more.
Oh.
Linwood and James were instrumental in a 6-inmate escape from Virginia's death row at Mecklenburg Correctional Center on May 31st of 1984. It was the largest breakout from death row in U.S. history.
And that's like extra credit. Like it's hard enough to break out of jail, but like you got to think that death row is like breaking out of jail in jail and then breaking out of jail.
Yes. Like, and death row. Like, what?
Yeah. Like those are this is almost as dumb as putting like them all on one plane and flying them across country so they can break out. I mean, who would do that?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so early on in the escape, which started with a coordinated effort between the inmates to take over the death row unit, both Linwood and James wanted to kill the guards that they had captured. Their plan was to douse them with rubbing alcohol and set them on fire with a lit match. It was inmate Willie Lloyd Turner, who also happened to be on death row, that stopped them. Willie had been convicted of murder. He was actually executed by lethal injection on May 25th of 1995, so 11 years later. Willie steps in front of the Brileys, preventing them from causing harm to the guards. Another death row inmate, Wilbert Lee Evans, stopped Linwood from raping a female nurse. Wilbert Lee was convicted of the murder of William Truesdale, a sheriff in Alexandria City. Despite pleas for clemency from the Mecklenburg guards, who said Evans was responsible for saving them, Willie Lee was executed on October 17th of 1990. Alexandria Commonwealth Attorney John Kloch opposed clemency, and Democratic Governor L. Douglas Wilder denied the clemency. L. Douglas was actually the state's first African-American governor.
You got to be like, when your fellow death row inmates are like, no, that's too evil.
Yeah. And they're both murderers.
Yeah.
And they're like, nah, dude, that's a bit much. You're going pretty far.
Yeah. Now, great notes. These guys may have been in there for a while and had reformed their lives and became upstanding, gentlemen. So don't say they weren't. But I mean, that's just to think that it took other death row inmates to stop death row inmates from committing more crimes.
Yeah. So initially, the escapees planned to head to Canada. Two inmates, Lem Davis Jr. and Willie Leroy James, almost made it all the way there. They were captured in Vermont. Lem was convicted of the rape and murder of a woman shortly after he'd just been released for the same crime. Willie Leroy was convicted on 2 counts of capital murder. Lem was executed by lethal injection on December 12th of 1996, and Willie Leroy was executed September 11th of 1992. The 4 remaining escapees parted ways in Philadelphia. The Briley Boys, the 2, went close to their uncle, Johnny Lee Counsel's house in the north part of the city. They were captured 19 days after their escape on June 19th by the FBI and police, who were able to find them because they had tapped their uncle's phone line. Wow. The Brileys' first escape, Detective Morgan's sergeant asked him if he wanted any patrol outside of his house for protection. Remember, Detective Morgan is the one who was actually able to finger Linwood in the death of DJ Johnny, because he was wearing the ring, because he had when he bought it. So they asked him if he wanted patrol outside of his house for protection. He declined. He said he was more than ready to take them out with the help of his friend, his .357 Magnum.
Again, seemingly a line out of a movie.
Right? Appeal after appeal was denied for Linwood and James until they ran out. Before his execution, James Jr. married Evangeline Grant Redding on March 28th of 1985 in a prison ceremony. His dad, James Sr., was in attendance. Both Briley brothers were executed at the Virginia State Penitentiary in Richmond, Virginia, by electric chair. Linwood was put to death on October 12th of 1984, and James about 2 weeks after his wedding on April 18th of 1985. Linwood had one son, Norman Laquan Ampey, who also ended up in prison after robbing a bank. He passed away in 2015. James Jr. has 3 daughters, all of whom, at least at last check, still live in Richmond, Virginia. The brothers are buried at the family plot in Bethel, North Carolina. And that is the story of those crazy, wild Briley boys.
Wow. And often, like, you'll have like a footnote that there was like times that they've shown up in popular culture. Is it possible this hasn't been made into a movie?
I could not find anything, and that doesn't mean that it's not out there, but in my research, there was nothing about them in the movies or TV shows.
I mean,
Which is
that
very
it just
odd.
that seems crazy because it just seems like it's like it would have, like, even if it was like, sometimes you'll mention like Criminal Minds will have like an episode that was influenced by, this, that, or the other thing, and that's just crazy that this, I mean, it's not something we want to celebrate, but
Right. But
it's
yeah.
like you said, it's a wild story.
And like you said, normally there is, oh, well, this Criminal Minds episode or this TV movie or, even
This
this big,
book,
yeah, but nothing. I saw nothing that was inspired by them.
so they had, was it 17 total? Is that what you said?
Crimes?
People that they 12 or 12. So I've been trying to keep track, and I'm bad at keeping track, but geez, 12 people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was all within, it was another one of those, because you called it a spree, right?
Yeah.
It was over a certain period. I don't know what the
Short
definition,
period of
we
time.
talked about. Yeah, we talked in the past, I think, when it with the gang of teenagers, what the definition of a spree was, but this definitely fits. Goodness gracious.
It's just wild to think that, not, like you said earlier, you've got the couples, the husband, wife, or the what was it, Raymond and what's her name, she was so in love with him, she was willing to do whatever. You get the couples,
Yeah.
that take each other out, and even in the couples that take each other out, usually the wife ends up taking out the husband, so it ends up being one. But here you've got not one, not two, not three, 4 people committed to doing these crimes.
And not even like, it wasn't like, oh, hey, people, like, we were robbing banks and people got killed, or we were like going for the money. Like, most of the time, like, what, Johnny G had $6.
Yeah.
This was all just about murder.
And he just stepped outside to for a break. He just was taking a break in between sets. He's performing. Yeah. He's minding his own business,
getting some fresh air. Jeez.
Yeah, and again, like I said, there was nothing, like, what was that turning point? Because they came from good homes. They didn't have that TBI, that traumatic brain injury. What was it that made these 3, 4, just turn out so terrible?
Yeah, and from, like you said, with 4 people, and how there definitely was, 2 powerful personalities with Linwood and James Jr., who seemed to be the ringleaders, and then like the younger brother who didn't even get charged with, there was no proof that he killed anybody, but he was involved. And then the friend, I mean, it just, I am shocked that no one's tried to write a movie about it. Like, it like, if this was on HBO, like, I could see this as a series on HBO.
Yeah.
Like, you got like the grizzled cop who's trying to find him, and just even the scene outside of the van. I mean, this just screams to be turned into a show.
Yeah. And maybe, like I said, maybe I missed it, but I looked and I could not find any.
Yeah, no, it would, if it has been, it didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't become a hit, because usually, like, almost every time, even ones I don't realize, like, I think it was Dog Day Afternoon, we like went through the whole story, and then you were like, hey, this is a movie, Adam, and I was like, oh my gosh, it is.
Yeah.
And I had no idea, but this one just so surreal.
There you
guess
go.
I got a summer project.
Are you gonna start a what is it, a Kickstarter? Is that even still a thing?
I'm sure. Well, there's so many more now. You got Kickstarter, you've got Patreon, you've got, like, ways that people can invest in stocks, like Mainvest and WeFunder, and there's so many different options. So I think Kickstarter's still around, but like it started a whole industry of crowdfunding.
So there you go. You can crowdsource your movie about the Briley Boys.
Yeah, I really think it's got to be a series though, because couldn't you see this as like sort of a
like a Mayor of Easttown?
Yeah, which got all sorts of is getting all sorts of award nominations. Golden Globes just came out this year, but the Golden Globes are a ghost of what they were because no one will put them on TV.
So I will help you with the music. I'll be your music person.
Oh yeah, you're gonna have to. You've done all the research already, so you're gonna get like half the writing credit. So.
Oh, but there you go. That is the
Excellent.
B-side.
Wow, that is, and even like I'm doing like there are books, and there's like you can find stuff on Audible, but there's just that's crazy. And there's like this is relatively. I mean, I guess okay, the '80s aren't as recent as my brain thinks they are, but there's video and stuff with it. It's shocking that there hasn't been that this hasn't become a bigger story.
Yeah.
All right, so is that the B-side?
That is the B-side.
And the good news is again they got caught, even though they escaped jail inside jail, they got caught again.
They're both gone, so there's no
the
worries.
2 leaders are gone. The 2 followers are in jail for life.
Yeah.
So it does at least end on that small bit of happiness.
But there it is.
All right, so changing gears away from, well, I guess it isn't even that far. As we were talking about how it feels weird that the Briley Brothers have not had their own grizzled TV show that explores their backstory, it kind of leads into, of course, the A side. We always talk about, some movies or media or, occasionally music or something that's going on in pop culture. And last week we talked about Chris Hemsworth's biggest bomb or box office bomb as part of the Marvel universe. And one of the neat things about all these Disney Plus series that keep popping up is that when one of them is successful, then all of the ancillary TV shows and movies or anything connected to people from that series or hit start to kind of bubble back up to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And so this week, as I've been watching Hawkeye, and we've talked about, I've finally come to terms with disclosing that I am a big Jeremy Renner fan. I actually have his music on Spotify, and so I've enjoyed the Hawkeye series. But as I'm flipping through the various streaming services, other stuff has started to pop up, and it got me into thinking about Jeremy Renner's career, and especially one movie that I saw in the theaters, but hadn't really thought much about since I saw it in the theaters. And I think I'm at the point now where everything, I'm in my early 40s, so I'm getting to that point where I like, is it 5 years ago? Is it 10 years ago? Is it 15 years ago? It could be any of those in my brain. And I easily can convince myself that it happened in a certain way. So I had to actually step back and do some research when the Jeremy Renner film, The Bourne Legacy, popped up on my HBO Go queue, because I said to myself, wait a second. The Jason Bourne series is, of course, famous as a Matt Damon vehicle. When you think Jason Bourne, Brooke, you immediately think Matt Damon, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, it's just they are synonymous. It was weird to have it'd be like Indiana Jones without Harrison Ford. It doesn't work. That actor is tied to that character. And I was trying to remember how it came to be that Jeremy Renner was in a Bourne movie. And I remember seeing the film in a theater. It only came out in 2012, which my brain had it coming out in like the early aughts, which remember the early 2000 to 2010, we were supposed to call it the aughts, and that never caught on.
It never caught on.
It did not catch on. I thought it came out in 2005, 2006, 2007. I had it completely out of place in the Bourne trilogy. It actually came out in 2012. And I had to dive in and see where is this in relation to the Bourne movies? Because I've rewatched all three of the Bourne movies in the last year: the Bourne Identity, which came out in 2002, the Bourne Supremacy, which came out in 2004, and the Bourne Ultimatum, which came out in 2007. Of course, they were all books based. They were all movies based off novels by Robert Ludlum. At one point in the early 2000s, after the Bourne Identity movie came out, I went on a road trip with my mom down to visit our grandparents on like a 12-hour road trip. And my mom and I both really enjoy the spy novels. Like when I was a kid, I was reading the Jack Ryan novels, and my mom was too. And so we got a book on tape, and it was one of the Bourne novels. And I just remember it was a very weird car trip driving with my mother, listening to this spy novel on audiobook, which is very graphic in both violence and then some other scenes where I was like, wow, this is just really strange to be listening to someone describe a fight scene while I'm sitting in the car with my mom. So my brain is totally thrown off by the Bourne movies and books chronologically. And I was convinced that at one point, and this again is Adam made up history, that that Matt Damon decided he didn't want to do the Bourne movies anymore. And in between Bourne Supremacy and the Bourne Ultimatum, the studio brought in Jeremy Renner to play Jason Bourne in this movie that nobody liked. And that's how I remembered in my head. And turns out that's not true at all. So you had the first three Bourne movies, which all starred Matt Damon, from Bourne Identity 2002, Bourne Supremacy 2004, Bourne Ultimatum 2007. It's got a trilogy. Everybody makes a ton of money. Everybody walks on. The studio decides they want to make a fourth Bourne movie, and the director, Paul Greengrass, who directed the first three Bourne movies, is not interested in making a fourth one. So Matt Damon says, I really enjoyed working with this guy. I don't want to work with another director on this character, so I don't want to do it either. So instead of them getting now I'm getting all thrown off. Instead of getting Jeremy Renner to come in and replace him as Jason Bourne, they bring in Jeremy Renner as an entirely different character, who I'm not sure who thought this was a good name, because I'm pretty sure it was a character from another. No, I'm wrong. But he comes in as Aaron Cross is the character. It wasn't there a Cross character that?
Yes, there was an Alex Cross.
Alex Cross, that's what it was. Alex Cross, that was first played by Morgan Freeman in a few movies, and then was later played by
Tyler Perry.
Yes. So I was like, why would you pick a name so similar to that? But Alex Cross, Aaron Cross, two entirely different characters, but way too close in terms of my opinion. So 2012's The Bourne Legacy continues the story of Jason Bourne without having Jason Bourne involved, starring Jeremy Renner, and basically tries to do a spin-off or start a new trilogy with this new actor in the same universe. I mean, it feels like what they did in and I'm going to get real nerdy here, like in Star Trek: The Next Generation, they had a backdoor pilot for Deep Space Nine, where there was an episode where Next Generation interacted with Deep Space Nine, and the Deep Space Nine became its own series. They kind of spun it off that way. So that's what it seems like what they attempted to do with the Bourne Legacy. And I rewatched it again this week because I was trying to figure out when it happened in reality and what made up history Adam had actually put together. And I think the biggest failure of the Bourne Legacy, which came out in 2012, was that it was trying to be connected to that world. It's a very fine spy, espionage action movie. And I think it would have been better if they just made it its own thing than trying to make it a Bourne. It's basically like if they had said, okay, we're going to do a Bond movie without Bond.
Right.
But it happens in the same universe. We're gonna bring in this other guy who's a secret agent, and it's happening in the Bond world, and he's still gonna fight Spectre, but he's not gonna be named James Bond. And so the entire movie, people are gonna be like, "Where's James Bond? What's going on?" And it doesn't help that throughout the Bourne Legacy, it is very cleverly set at the same time as the Bourne Ultimatum. So Bourne Ultimatum, which came out in 2007, is chronologically happening at the same time as the Bourne Legacy, which is where I think I got really confused when I was remembering my misremembering, because there are scenes that they take direct that happen in the Bourne Ultimatum that are then referenced or even seen as real life events during Bourne Legacy. So there's a character, journalist in the Bourne Ultimatum who then what happens to him is referenced in the Bourne Legacy, even though it's only a news report that they're talking about. So not only is it to continue the comparison, a Bond movie without Bond happening in the Bond universe, it's also half the characters are asking and talking about James Bond the whole time. So Jason Bourne is a character within this movie as someone that everyone continually refers to, but Matt Damon is not in the movie. Those pictures of Matt Damon as Jason Bourne popping up on TV screens and in dossiers, and he is definitely a character and a driving force of the movie, but Matt Damon himself never shows up. So it was like they wanted to have another Bourne movie and they wanted to have Jason Bourne in it, but they couldn't get Matt Damon to sign off on it. So they did this sort of wedging this other character in there. And in doing that, they wasted some really great performances. Well, I don't know if great, really good performances, enjoyable performances by three of my favorite actors to watch in movies, one being Jeremy Renner, Rachel Weisz, who I think I have seen almost everything that she has ever been in, ever since I saw her in an off-Broadway production of The Shape of Things way back in 2002, and stood 10 feet away from her and was just completely blown away. So now it's like anything that she's in, I'm like, yes, I'm going to watch it. So I know that she was a big reason I went to this when it opened in 2012. And then I've always loved Edward Norton. Edward Norton is one of those actors who I think if he could get out of his own way, he could have been so much bigger, but everything you hear and rumors and like he's not easy to work with, he's sort of a jerk and people don't say good things about him, but I've enjoyed so many of his performances, but I can't think of a performance where I enjoyed him where he wasn't playing a jerk,
right?
Because I mean he's always just sort of like he's not the biggest jerk in Fight Club, but he's still kind of a jerk in Fight Club. So yeah. He's a jerk. Yeah. I wish that he could have. I think he has so much talent. He bought one of my favorite books, one of the top 5 books that I've ever read, is Motherless Brooklyn by Jonathan Lethem. And he bought the screen rights to it. It languished for like 10 years before it got made. It got made and it went straight to video, and it's not very good. And I was so excited when I heard that he was going to do it because I thought it was a great story to be told, and there was a lot there, and it didn't work, and it was real disappointing. But you've got a excellent performance by him playing a jerk, so he definitely has that down. Rachel Weisz playing sort of the doctor, not just damsel in distress, because she's very capable, and she probably gets to do the most growing within the series. She gets to play that sort of audience participation character that I like. So what I mean by that is like she's the one who's asking like what's going on, why is this happening, and other characters are explaining the story to her, so we as an audience also are getting the exposition and kind of know what's going on. Mm-hmm. It's like the Han Solo character in Star Wars who's like, what is even happening here with all this hokey space wizards and stuff, right. And he's giving us the asking the questions that we as an audience are asking. And Rachel Weisz does an excellent job. Jeremy Renner, I think this might be one of my favorite performances of his. It's very understated. It's so weird because I'm watching the Bourne Ultimatum at the same day I'm watching Hawkeye, and you've got the Bourne Legacy is what late 30s Jeremy Renner, like trying to become an action hero, and then you've got a much more world weary and open to comedy and kind of the Jeremy Renner in Hawkeye, where it's in my opinion an incredibly vulnerable type of performance where he's kind of letting a little bit of his own personal career arc influence the Hawkeye character, where he's at this point where, he's always kind of been the other guy in movies, and he never really became the lead big star as we thought he might with after movies like The Hurt Locker and The Bourne Legacy. And he just never really blew up. He's always kind of been the other guy in the movie. And there's some of that realness that I think is coming through in his hockey character. He's incredibly well suited to the role. He's believable. There's a fun little small part for Oscar Isaac in the beginning of the movie that I had totally forgotten about, which I really enjoyed, because it's fun to see some of these actors show up in roles that you weren't expecting. He pops up. Scott Glenn has a nice supporting role. Stacy Keach. There is Corey Stoll, who was the bad guy Yellow Jacket in Ant-Man, and has been all over the place. There's a really talented cast of people, and I think if the movie and the writers had just wanted to tell the story of Aaron Cross as this deep cover operative who gets burned and has to survive, that story would have gone over better without all of the connections to Jason Bourne, because the character of Jason Bourne haunts the movie as if you just started dating someone and they keep telling you about their ex.
Right.
Whereas you're like, hey, oh, okay. Oh, they were into skiing. That's awesome. Why are we talking about skiing? We're at the beach. It's just like, leave them in the past and let's focus on the good thing. It was not well received. Its thermometer or tomato meter, depending on how you want to say it, is only 55% from critics and 58% from audience. And I usually lean towards the audience score, but it's always disappointing when you can see that the audience is about the same as the critics. It means that no one really enjoyed it. It made some money. There was some talk about doing a sequel, but where Adam's revisionist history got impacted is in my brain. As I said earlier, I thought that the Jeremy Renner Bourne movie happened between the second and third Jason Bourne movies starring Matt Damon. It did not.
You were like, it was so bad with Jeremy, they had to bring Matt Damon back.
And they did, but they did it later. I had completely mentally erased that there have been 5 movies in the Jason Bourne universe. There was the first 3 starring Matt Damon. Then Jeremy Renner came along in 2012. And then, just as my brain had said, I was just about a decade off, they came back with Matt Damon and Paul Greengrass in 2015 for the 5th Bourne movie, which is simply titled Jason Bourne.
Oh,
so
yeah.
in my brain, I had totally failed to remember that there were 5 total Bourne movies, and they did in fact. So in a way, to give my revisionist brain history a little bit of credit, I did remember that the Jeremy Renner movie happened in between Matt Damon Jason Bourne movies. I just didn't remember how many Jason Bourne movies there were starring Matt Damon, and I forgive me, Jason Bourne fans, for my inability to remember. So if you are interested in watching the Bourne Legacy with Jeremy Renner, if you like action movies, if you enjoy the Hawkeye series, if you do enjoy performances by Jeremy Renner, which it feels like for some reason people dislike him almost to like an Imagine Dragons level, where you're like, well, why do we dislike? Because there's the Imagine Dragons joke in the Hawkeye series where somebody's like, well, hey, now you don't have to go to the Imagine Dragons concert. The guy was like, oh, I really like Imagine Dragons.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but I guess I missed it. I was like, okay, they're not the biggest thing ever, but do we hate them now? Is that a cultural thing? We don't like them? But I think Jeremy Renner is kind of the same thing. People decided that they don't like him as much, or something. Probably goes back to the failure of trying to have your own app a few years ago. But if you do, if you're like me and you're willing to admit that you enjoy his performances and you're not scared of the social media backlash anymore, and you're enjoying Hawkeye, if you'd like to see the Bourne Legacy, which came out in 2012 after the 3rd Matt Damon, before the 4th Matt Damon Jason Bourne movies, it is available on HBO Go. So if you, or HBO Max, I'm sorry, it's called HBO Max now. So it is available on there with your subscription. You can rent it at any of the streaming services for $3.99. So your Apple TV, Amazon, Google Play, YouTube, Vudu, Redbox, DirecTV, even AMC theaters on demand, which is just a weird thing that exists. Like the movie theater trying to get in on the demand
On the
stuff.
streaming, yeah.
It just doesn't feel like it was like, no, this is not the place for you, but good try. You can also buy it. It's, if you, I have the feeling that if you are out and if you're like me, and this is probably another Scroogey thing that I do, I love shopping on Christmas Eve. Every year I go out on Christmas Eve and do some shopping because there's just no overthinking, there's this sense of desperation and panic in the air. And you just walk in and you don't like second guess. You're like, I got to find something for this person, this person, and this person. And you go with your gut and you're there with like-minded people. Like I'm walking around, searching for a gift for somebody. And I see another guy who's also doing the same thing. And like, we catch each other's eyes. We're walking across and we're like, yeah, we're with our people here. We're with the procrastinators, the last minute people, those people that work best under pressure. So if you're out on Christmas Eve and I see you out, because I'll be out, we'll probably be looking in that giant bin of DVDs by the checkout. Like you're in line and you're like, oh yeah, I got to get cousin Joe a gift as well. And there's that $5.99 giant bin of DVDs. Odds are the Bourne Legacy is in there. So if you see it for $5.99, it's a lot cheaper than buying it on any of the Amazon or any of that for the DVD. I recommend picking it up. I think it's worth an impulse buy for Christmas as a stocking stuffer, or as you're flipping channels or going through the streaming services and on HBO Max. It's worth checking out. So the Bourne Legacy with Jason Bourne is this week's highlight on the A side.
I think we talked about this a little bit last week. It's like it would have been like we talked about it with Men in Black, like the one with Chris Hemsworth. If it had just been an alien movie, it would have been fine. If this had just been a spy movie, but not a Bourne movie, it would have been great.
Yeah, and like everyone, like you could have taken the Jason Bourne connection completely out of this movie, and it only makes it better. The dogs know what I'm saying. The dogs are with me. Where are my dogs at? But I think if you take the Jason Bourne stuff out of this movie, it doesn't change the movie at all, and it makes it a better movie. And you're not spending the whole movie with this ghost of a character that you're looking for. Just like in Men in Black, we were waiting for Will Smith. We wanted Tommy Lee Jones, and they're not coming through that door.
Well, that's another movie I've got to put on my list. So thanks, Adam.
Yeah. No, you're welcome. That's when I'm out shopping on Christmas Eve, if I find it in the big bin by the checkout, I'll send that along because I've already sent you a DVD player.
I was going to say.
I didn't send you any DVDs, which, I mean, come on. That was lame. I couldn't throw a DVD in the box.
I was going to say, if you find it, go ahead and grab me a DVD so I can play it in the DVD player you sent me.
And that is, it's still working correctly, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right, good. All right. I had this like nightmare that I had packaged it up. I'd send it to you and I didn't check it. Like I hadn't plugged that in since I moved. And so it sat like on my, entertainment center. And actually that you can still see the spot that I need to clean a little bit better where the dust, where the dust piled over it. And I was like, as I mailed it, I was like, oh my gosh, I really should have double checked that it still works.
No, it still works. It's perfect.
Oh, thank good.
Yeah, I've got it in my room because I was like debating. I was like, do I put this in my room? Do I put it in the living room? And then my daughter was like, just put it in your room. And then if we need to, because it's only like one cord, like if we need to move it and we have company, then just move it. And I was like, smart.
Yeah. Somebody taught her right.
I don't know who.
Go public school system.
All right. Well, so the storms that just left me are headed your way. So I'm going to let you go so you can hunker down and be safe.
Yeah. I live on the fourth floor of my apartment building. And as soon as we get done recording, I'm opening up all the windows so I can see it. Because right now we are already getting like just the window I can see. And opening them up at the shades, not like going to open up and let let the
Just let the
storm in.
Yeah.
But the lightning I can see right now is already lighting up the sky. It's gonna be quite the evening. So I'm very much looking forward to it. Hopefully it is all light and sound and nobody gets hurt. And we make it through. But I think I just sent you, I don't know if you checked your phone, but I just sent you a screenshot of the radar. And I feel like I can hear the Jaws music coming.
Man, yeah. Well, you go ahead and you get safe. I know there's a couple of fires here in town due to the storm that was just here. So this is just odd weather for this time of year.
Yeah, it's almost like the climate is changing in some way.
You would think, maybe.
I don't know. Very strange.
Yeah. All right, Adam. Thanks. Oh, wait, before we go, I guess we should tell you about our socials and stuff, right?
Yeah, we should do like the ending where I mentioned that we're an Angelina Jolie podcast, and you should visit A-Side B-Side podcast.square.site. And you can, if you want to support the show, you can go to our website, which is A-Side B-Side podcast.square.site, or follow us on Instagram, which is A-Side B-Side podcasts. A-Side
_ B-Side _ pod.
See, I learned the website.
Close,
I really should have learned everything else. You could also,
you were on a roll.
Yeah, you could buy us a coffee, because I know most people when they listen to this are like, wow, Adam is exceptionally eloquent. I only sound eloquent because Brooke takes all of my ums and ahs and missteps and the 375 times an episode that I interrupt her off through editing. So that takes probably all night. So if you see Brooke on a Thursday or Friday and she looks extra tired, it's because she spent all night editing the podcast. And you can help by going to buy us a coffee and send us some money there, or you can buy merch on our website, which would be great Christmas gifts. Spoiler alert, not going to get there by Christmas because it's 10 days before Christmas, and you should have thought of that before now. But if you want to get somebody a nice gift for Adam's birthday, or which is also the birthday of Elvis Presley, Stephen Hawking, and David Bowie coming up in January, you can get a gift, and it might be here by then. Also, when you listen to our podcast, make sure you rate us, like us, share with your friends, whether that is on Stringer, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Music. My goal for the end of 2022 is for somebody to screenshot me that we were their most listened to podcast in their Spotify Wrapped at the end of the year. That is like, I know I need to dream big, but maybe that's too big a dream. But yeah, that's what I hope happens for 2022, that we are somebody's most listened to podcast. So definitely do that on those. And what did I forget, Brooke?
We've got a Twitter. We've got a Facebook.
Yes, those are other social medias.
But you know what? You covered it, and I'm proud of you. Go, Adam. Go.
Yeah.
You've been paying attention.
I've been kind of paying attention. After 73 episodes, I got about 73% of the stuff that we talk about.
Also, we'll have sources and photos on the website as well.
Absolutely.
All right.
And as Adam hit send on the email that Brooke just reminded me I needed to send.
Oh, man. Episode 73. Woo! All right. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Brooke.